All right, well, I will begin. My name is Jason Morado with ETC Institute. Um, we're a marketing research firm that specializes in conducting community surveys for local governments. And this past fall, for the first time, we conducted a community survey for the town of Scarborough. So today I'm going to go through the key findings from the survey. The full report that we provided is very detailed and comprehensive. So today I'm going to start by going through the high-level findings, and I'll be happy to answer any questions as well. And then if we want, we can go through the results at a more detailed level. I do have one quick slide about ETC Institute. We're based in the Kansas City area, but we're a national leader in providing market research for local government. We've been doing this type of work for more than 35 years. And in the last 10 years alone, we've conducted surveys in more than 900 communities all across the country. So this is really the type of work that we specialize in. This is just a quick rundown of what I'll go through today. I'll go over the purpose and methodology of the survey. What I call the bottom line up front are our main conclusions, boiled down to a couple of PowerPoint slides. And then I'll go through the major survey findings to show how we came to those conclusions. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer those. I have quite a few slides to go through, so if you want to jump in and ask a question as I'm going through, that's perfectly fine. Or if you want to wait till the end, that works as well. So there are several reasons to conduct a survey like this. One is to get an objective assessment of how satisfied residents are with the delivery of major town services, and then also to help determine what residents feel are the top priorities for the community. Hopefully this survey will also help set a baseline for future surveys. A lot of communities that we work with conduct these surveys every 2 to 3 years and include a lot of the same questions each time so that we can start measuring trends over time. And then also we're able to compare your results with other communities across the country. So just a little background about the survey. The survey was 7 pages long, the mailed version of it was, and that's a pretty typical length for one of our community surveys. The survey was administered by a combination of mail and online to randomly selected residents throughout the town. Our goal is to receive at least 600 completed surveys, and we had a really, really good response. Even though the survey was conducted just a little before the holiday season, this was conducted really from early November to early December. Our goal was 600 surveys, and we ended up with 862 completed surveys. And the results of the 862 surveys at the 95% level of confidence has a margin of error plus or minus 3.2%. So essentially that means that if we conducted this survey the same way 100 times, 95 times the results would be plus or minus 3.2% from what we're reporting. So the results aren't perfect, but really there is a very small margin of error. So here we have a map of the town. The red dots are households that completed the survey. So we had a good distribution all throughout the town. And we also made sure we had a good representation from key demographic areas such as age, race, ethnicity, and gender. So here are our main conclusions from the survey. We found that residents have a very positive perception of Scarborough. 86% of respondents were satisfied with the overall quality of life, which is an outstanding number, much higher than most other communities. We also found that the satisfaction with town services is much higher in Scarborough than it is in other communities. You rated above the US average in 59 out of the 60 areas that we compared. And in most cases, your ratings are significantly higher, which we'll see in more detail in a little bit. As I was looking through this benchmarking data, there were a couple of areas that especially stood out. One is that for the satisfaction with the overall quality of town services, you rated 14% above the US average. And that's one of the most important questions on the survey, because they were asking residents to take into account all of the services that you provide and really give an overall satisfaction rating for how well you're providing services. And the other area that really stood out was satisfaction with customer service from town employees. There you rated 42% above the US average. I believe 93% of respondents were satisfied with the overall quality of customer service from town employees, which is one of the highest numbers I've ever seen. So really, really outstanding numbers. And then we found that the top priorities for town services are traffic flow and the ease of getting around town, maintenance of streets, sidewalks, and infrastructure. And then we asked residents what are the top issues facing Scarborough over the next 5 years. And the top choices were pace of growth and expansion, affordability of town services, and affordable housing. So first we'll look at some general perceptions that residents have of town. Here we asked residents how satisfied they are with a number of different areas related to perceptions of Scarborough. So for this chart, the dark blue are those who are very satisfied, the light blue is satisfied, the gray is neutral, and we interpret neutral as meeting expectations for these types of charts. It's a rating of a 3 on the 5-point scale. And the pink are those who are dissatisfied, the darker pink are dissatisfied. So overall, the positive ratings far outweigh the negative. There's a lot more blue than pink. If you look at the top of this chart, most residents feel safe in Scarborough, and most are satisfied with the overall quality of life. Another area that stood out was this fourth row down. 73% of respondents are satisfied with the overall quality of town services, and that's compared to only 5% who are dissatisfied. And again, that's to us one of the most important questions on the survey. There were a couple of areas that had more dissatisfied residents than satisfied. That's these bottom 2 rows, how well the town is managing growth, and then the availability of affordable housing. This was the very first question on the survey. Here we asked residents to rate major categories of town services. And then later on in the survey, we asked them to rate some more specific areas within some of these categories. So here you can see the blue, once again, far outweighs the negative, a lot more positive respondents than negative. In fact, over 85% of respondents were satisfied with customer service, public safety, library services, public beaches and waterfront parks. There was only one area where the dissatisfied rating, there were more dissatisfied respondents than satisfied, and that was public transportation. Another area that had over 30% of respondents who were dissatisfied was traffic flow, but even for that, you still had more satisfied than dissatisfied residents. So we also found that residents in all areas of Scarborough are satisfied with the overall quality of town services. So here we have a map of the town. And what we did here is we broke the results out by census block group. So these are very small areas. We created a map like this for every question on the survey asked on the 5-point scale. So there are over 100 maps like this in the report. This one is for the overall quality of town services. And you can see the entire map is blue. So what this tells us is that residents in all parts of the town are satisfied with the overall quality of town services. And it also shows that you're providing services equally throughout the town. Sometimes what happens is, even if the ratings are really good overall, once you break it into these smaller geographic areas, you'll see some areas where residents aren't dissatisfied or feel like they're not getting as good of service as people in other parts of the town. But here you can see that that's not the case at all, as the entire map is blue. And this map is for the overall quality of life in Scarborough. Here, not only is the entire map blue, but there are several areas in dark blue, which is the highest possible rating, which means that residents in all parts of the town are satisfied with the overall quality of life. So I mentioned earlier that satisfaction with town services is much higher in Scarborough than it is in other communities. You rated above the US average in 59 out of the 60 areas that we compared. And what especially is impressive about that is that you rated significantly higher in 50 of those areas. And by significant, we mean more than the margin of error of the survey, which was at 3.2%. And also you rated above the Northeast average in 58 of the 68 areas, and significantly higher in 52 of those areas. And this is based on a national survey that ETC Institute conducts every year with randomly selected residents from all across the country. We conduct the survey every year so that we always have the most updated benchmarking data when we do these comparisons. So for these next few charts, the dark blue line are Scarborough residents who are either very satisfied or satisfied. The gray bar are the satisfaction ratings from residents in the Northeast region, which includes the state of Maine as well as some surrounding states. And then the national average, which is the light blue, are the satisfaction ratings from residents from all across the US. So this first chart's for major categories of town services. In 9 of the 12 areas, your ratings are significantly higher than both the regional and national average, which is what the blue arrow represents. So that includes everything from public safety, library, solid waste, parks and recreation, public education, stormwater management, communication, public, maintaining streets and sidewalks. And then the area that to me really stands out the most is this top row, customer service from town employees. You had a 93% satisfaction rating, and you can see the regional and national average are just barely over 50%. Now for codes and ordinances, your ratings were a little above the regional and national average, but not significantly. And then there were just 2 areas where your ratings were below other communities. And that includes traffic flow and then public transportation. These comparisons are all specific for public safety. In most areas, your ratings are significantly higher than other communities. So that includes police protection. This top row, that's one of the ones that stands out the most. Overall, 93% of respondents were satisfied with the overall quality of police protection, which you can see is almost 30% above the national average. Other areas where you rate significantly higher include fire protection, how quickly both police and fire respond to emergencies, overall efforts to prevent crime. When it comes to visibility of police in neighborhoods, there your ratings are more on par with other communities. And the one area that does rate lower is visibility of police in retail areas. These comparisons are related to infrastructure. Once again, you can see in most areas your ratings are significantly higher. This includes things such as the cleanliness of streets and other public areas, snow removal, the condition of both major streets as well as neighborhood streets. The only area that rates lower is street lighting. And actually street lighting is pretty much on par with the regional average, but it's below the national average. And then sidewalks is quite a bit higher than the regional average, but just a little bit below the national average. And then these comparisons are for community services. This is mainly related to parks and recreation. You can see in, again, most areas your ratings are significantly higher, which includes a wide variety of services such as walking and biking trails, playgrounds, recreation programs, special events. There's a couple of areas where your ratings were either just slightly above or more on par with other communities, but there's nothing that rated significantly below. And then for trash and recycling, you can see very high ratings for trash collection, very high ratings for curbside recycling. Both of those are more than 20% above the national average. For recycling services and drop-off centers, the ratings are not bad, but they're more on par with other communities. And then this is another area that really stood out. We asked how residents felt about the town's response to COVID-19. 75% of residents were satisfied or very satisfied with the town's overall response to COVID-19. The regional average is only 36%, and the national average is 33%. And this is based on a national study that ETC Institute's been doing since March of 2020, residents from all across the country. So these are really amazing results, more than double both the regional and national average. So now we'll switch gears and take a look at top priorities. We asked residents, what are the 3 most significant issues you think Scarborough will face over the next 5 years? You can see the top priority is pace of community growth and expansion, followed by the affordability of town services, and then third was affordable housing. So those are really the top 3 that kind of stand out. So I showed earlier how satisfied residents were with major categories of city services. As a follow-up question to that, we asked which of these services should receive the most emphasis from town leaders over the next 2 years. Excuse me. And residents could pick up to their top 3 choices. So the area that they think should receive the most emphasis, number 1 was traffic flow and ease of getting around town. 59% of respondents picked that as one of their top 3 choices. The second highest priority was maintaining streets, sidewalks, and infrastructure. And then third is public education. So this leads to something that we call the important satisfaction rating. And this is a tool that we use to help communities set priorities. And this analysis is based on 2 different types of data. First, we ask residents how satisfied they are with services. And then as a follow-up question, we ask which services should receive the most emphasis from town leaders over the next couple of years. So essentially, which are the most important. And the idea behind this is that those areas that have a combination of low satisfaction, but at the same time are rated as the most important should be the highest priorities. So making improvements in those areas would impact the greatest number of residents. So this first table is for major categories of town services. By a wide margin, the top overall priority is the overall flow of traffic and ease of getting around town. Residents rate that, as we just saw, as the most important item, and it ranked 12th out of 13 in satisfaction. And then there were 2 areas that were all a high priority, one tier below traffic flow, but above the rest of the list. That includes maintenance of streets, sidewalks, infrastructure, and then public transportation. We also created an important satisfaction table for some specific areas on the survey. This one is around infrastructure, and excuse me, the top 3 priorities were sidewalks, street lighting, and then neighborhood streets. This table is specifically for public safety. Here there's one area that fell into the high priority category, which is visibility of police in neighborhoods. A couple other areas that are in the medium category, but just missed falling into the high priority, were visibility of police in retail and then enforcing local traffic laws. And then for community services, which is mainly parks and recreation, there were 3 areas that fell into the high priority category, which were access and public parking for natural resources and parks, facilities for indoor programs and classes, and then senior recreation programs. So I've got a couple other findings to take a look at. We asked residents how satisfied they were with the assistance that they received from the person who took their 911 call. This is obviously based on respondents who have contacted 911 within the past year, which was about almost 18% of respondents. And you can see the results are extremely positive. 96% of respondents were satisfied with the assistance they received from the person who took their 911 call. That includes 72% who were very satisfied. Here we asked about residents' perception of the town's current pace of growth and development. So the yellow area means residents feel the pace of growth and development is too slow in those areas. The gray means it's just right. And then the dark red means they feel like the pace of development is too fast. So if you look at these top couple of rows, about 2/3 of residents feel like the pace of development for residential, both single family and multifamily, is too fast. And then towards the bottom here, a little over 60% feel like the pace of redevelopment of abandoned or underutilized properties is too slow. We also asked about primary sources of information about town issues, services, and events. The top source of information you can see is the newspaper, Scarborough Leader, followed by the town's website. Those are by far the top 2. The third and fourth primary sources are an email subscription through the newsletter and Facebook. And then as a follow-up question, we asked, what are your most preferred methods of receiving information? And you can see there's three that really stand out. It's the newspaper, town's website, then the e-newsletter. So this is pretty closely aligned with the way people are currently getting information, but I do think there's a little opportunity to reach more people through the newsletter. Right now, 33% of respondents say they're currently getting information through the e-newsletter, but 44% say that would be one of their most preferred methods of getting information. And then for those respondents who have contacted the town within the past year, we asked them how they feel about their interaction with town employees. And you can see these results are very positive. The dark blue means that employees always exhibit these behaviors. The light blue means they usually do. So for example, if you look at this top row, 93% of residents who had Scarborough employees either always or usually are courteous and professional. 89% feel like it's always or usually easy to find someone to address their requests. If you look at this fourth row down, overall 80% of residents felt like they were satisfied with their experience. And then we asked about support for capital improvement projects. The blue are those who are supportive, the red are not supportive, the gray are neutral. So the most support is definitely with the community center. 69% are either very or somewhat supportive, compared to 14% who are not supportive. So that's everything that I had for the main presentation. Just a quick recap. We saw that residents have a very positive perception of Scarborough. 86% are satisfied with overall quality of life. We also saw that satisfaction with town services is much higher in Scarborough than it is in other communities. There's a lot of examples of that, but a couple that really stood out were the overall quality of town services, and then especially customer service from town employees, which is one of the highest numbers that I've ever seen. And then top priorities for town services, traffic flow and ease of getting around town, maintenance of street, sidewalks, and infrastructure. And then when we asked residents, what are the top issues facing the town over the next 5 years? It was pace of growth and expansion, the affordability of town services, and affordable housing. So that is everything that I had. Obviously, of course, there's always room for improvement, but obviously overall the results are extremely positive. So does anyone have any questions or comments?
Councilor.
Yeah, Jason, a great report. Could you get back to what the neutral value meant?
So neutral, we interpret that as meeting expectations. It does mean that people have an opinion, because there's also an option of selecting don't know. And for those charts, we exclude the don't knows. So those charts you walk through are based on people who had an opinion, gave a rating of a 5 through a 1. So neutral is a 3 out of 5, 3 on the 5-point scale.
Okay. Another follow-up on it is there, because I heard a lot from folks that went to take the survey that for whatever reason thought it was a little too long. You know, I guess 20 minutes was too long for some. Was there any way to tell who started the survey but did not finish the survey? Was there any way for you guys to tell that?
For online surveys, yes. For mailed surveys, you know, if we get them back, they're fully filled out. Otherwise, they don't mail them back to us. But for online surveys, there are some people who start the survey and don't finish. In most cases, they leave the survey pretty early on. There aren't many people who get, say, 2/3 of the way through and then drop off. But it is a long survey, but it's typical length for one of our community surveys. They're usually 6 to 7 pages. But that is, of course, something you have to balance. You know, if you had a 2-page survey, we'd have a much better response, but way less information. 10-page survey would give us all kinds of information, but it'd be hard to get people to fill it out. So we kind of shoot for that 6 to 7 page range.
Right. So if the town of Scarborough was to take the approach of doing this maybe every 2 or every 3 years, and see that we're kind of limited to 7 pages, which understandable, that's about a 20-minute effort. Where's the threshold on a category that may not be the most efficient use of time, effort, and money to do 1, 2 years from now? If something is up in the 80 percentile, can you say, hey, we're good, but we can focus more on the ones that that were lower to see if we've made improvements, drill down a little deeper with more detailed questions? What do you recommend? What's usually done?
Are you talking about which types of questions to include on the survey? Like if you were to do it again next time in a couple of years?
Right. If we're going to do it again, we all see that 93% of the people are very satisfied with the customer service. Now,
right.
I don't want that to get lost. But again, in the interest of space on the 7 pages,
right.
Because when we did this initially, you can't boil the ocean with 7 pages. And
right.
we included other entities in the survey because, we're all one town. We want to get some feedback. But we come back again, we want to see what have we done? Have we done anything right? I would just wonder if that's also a typical survey, or is it usually just the same questions year after year?
Usually most of the questions are the same. Like I would say maybe 80%. In particular, the questions on the 5-point scale are really easy to trend over time. You can change as many as you would like, of course, but usually most of those stay the same. I mean, some questions are more timely, so it makes sense not to ask them next time. Like obviously the COVID question. There could be, you might find that some of the data you got isn't useful in certain areas, so maybe you don't need those questions next time. Whereas there might be something else you want to even dig a little deeper in or learn more about. So of course, we work with you on that, but I'd say on average, 80 to 85% of the questions are the same each time.
And my final question for you, and this is mainly for the public, but my understanding also is because this is theoretically a statistically sound survey, that when I'm looking at a percentage one way or the other, positive or negative, that truly is, in theory, a reflection of all the residents in the town and not the 862 people that took the survey. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. It represents the entire town. There is, of course, a margin of error, but it's a small margin of error. It's just a little over 3%. And the reason it's that small is because we had such a good response to the survey. Almost 900 completed surveys.
Okay, and I was going to ask you if there's any other questions. Just walk us through that GIS mapping so we know how to use it, because I have a feeling some of our residents will like that feature. So I'm good.
So why don't we do some questions, and then maybe if we have time, we'll go to the maps. Okay, Councilor Anderson and then Councilor.
Yeah. Jason, I guess a quick question. I love the comparisons across national and regions, but when we look at the survey results, is there something that's considered like a best in class score? So like anything 50% and above is actually considered good? Because some of the question answers were pretty low. And I would think that even though compared to national and regional averages, we were ahead, but like, should we still be striving to make improvements in that area to deliver best in class service to citizens? So I don't know, is there like, when we look at it at the data, should we be saying like, if it's below 50%, we need to do something, or there's clearly room for improvement?
So as far as, I'm not sure if I quite understood that. So if the satisfaction ratings, let's say they're low, but still like 50% or less are satisfied, how do you look at that when comparing it to other communities? Is that, or am I misunderstanding that?
I just know from surveys that we do at work sometimes for some of the products and services that we offer, we'll use like NPS and another satisfaction methodology. And we usually say anything for one method above 70% is usually a really good response. We should be satisfied with that for any question. And so
right.
The same thing on this, is there like something, a benchmark that's considered best in class, that anything above or below a certain number would be considered best in class?
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's definitely a good question. But one of the things, well, I think the benchmarking data is valuable is because it does add context to the data. There's some areas that always rate much higher than others. For example, code enforcement. The national average is in the 40% range. It's very unusual for a community even to be above 60% when it comes to code enforcement. So for example, if 70% were satisfied with code enforcement, that would be a really good number. Whereas for like fire services, the ratings are always high. You know, if 70% were satisfied with fire services, that would be a really low number. You know, that would be much lower than normal. So it's hard to say there's a certain, it's hard to say it's equal for all services as far as a certain range, I guess is what I'm saying. For some areas, 80% would be a great number, but that would be a bad number for something else, if that makes sense.
And then my other question, when it comes to the non-random sample participants that participated in the online version after we got to the number we needed, how do we look at those results to compare that to the random sample, just to see if there's any differences between the two populations? Because my hope is that they're much more similar than they are different, and it would be good to know that they are similar where they're different.
Right. Yeah, we do still need to finish processing that data. Usually what happens is what you said, the results are similar. Usually the demographics are skewed, so you have to keep that in mind. It usually skews older, almost always it does. A lot of times the satisfaction ratings are a little bit lower than the statistically valid survey, but the priorities are very similar. So we still need to process that, but that's almost always how those turn out.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I would be interested to see is more the higher level. Are the priorities aligned? Do they all come out kind of the same? The numbers will be different for sure, but
right.
Just, that they're more similar than they are different, I think would be interesting to see when you guys have that data finalized.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. We still need to do that, and I should be able to send that out. I would think early next week.
Thank you again for all your hard work on this. It was excellent working with you. I really appreciate all the time and effort that you put into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Jason, this is incredible data. Thank you very much. Looking at when we did some comparison to the regional and national results when it came to satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak a little bit to the regional and national comparison when it comes to more of the abstract concerns such as growth and resident growth? So for instance, in this, it might be somewhere else, but here there's not necessarily a comparison to the regional concern about growth or the regional concern about affordable housing. So it seems like we benchmarked ourselves with the satisfaction, which makes perfect sense. Are there benchmarks out there for them? I don't want to call them abstract because they're very real issues, right, but they're direct satisfaction. Did we do that, or can we do it, or how does that work?
Yeah, so those the benchmarking that we provided is based on questions that we ask most frequently, kind of our standard benchmarking questions. Those other ones are ones we don't ask as often, or when we do, they're more customized for each community. You know, I could try to find some like specific communities that have asked similar questions to look at some comparisons, but we just don't have a national benchmarking database for those types of questions. Just because they are asked not as often, and when they are more customized for each specific community.
Yeah, I see in the deeper materials. I was in here half distracted, so I was trying to look at the deeper material. You guys do have some form of that in the more robust report that we have. So my question is half moved, but that makes sense. Yeah.
So, I mean, just to the point of growth, I could just read it in. So it looks like, and this is in your report on page 43, our Scarborough's score was 25.2. The Northeast region was 53.6, and the national average was 43.8. So it looked like we scored significantly less satisfied with the elementary growth.
Yeah. And I have one more. To public transportation, you know, Scarborough doesn't necessarily geographically lend itself to a whole lot of public transportation, right? And I think that's just the reality. We're not going to have bus stops in West Scarborough, or too many bus stops in West or North Scarborough. So is there any accounting for, you know, for instance, I could see us trying to serve the heart of Scarborough, so to speak, the high growth areas of Scarborough for public transportation. But And I'm sure we can pull this out with a gist map, but out where I live on the Gorham Scarborough line, I don't foresee us, I guess I would always rate my access to public transportation as a 1 because it's not going to happen, right? Do you find that in more geographically dispersed areas like that, we have a lot of sprawl here? Is that common, that type of result?
Yeah, this is a common result. I'm not super surprised by how the results came out for the public transportation. The other thing to keep in mind about that is the charts that I showed were excluded people who selected don't know and don't have an opinion. For that one, almost half of residents said don't know to public transportation. So when you look at the importance satisfaction table, it was the 3rd highest priority. But the reason I didn't list it as a top priority during my summary slide was because of that. There were a lot of people who didn't answer the question, didn't have an opinion about it. So I think that's one thing we also have to keep in mind when looking at that.
But that's actually very helpful because you would assume if you're going to answer, I don't know, if you're in an area such as mine that I don't expect it. So I'm not going to answer the question. Okay, that's helpful. That helps us. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Councilor Hamel.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Just want to echo the prior comments. Great piece of work. Glad that we picked you, and I think the results really speak for themselves. And for me, they really affirmed a couple of things that I had assumptions about. We heard the public tell us about, they're happy with the high level of services and the performance of by the town of those, and a very clear direction in terms of what the priority should be, not only for town services, but also for the top issues facing Scarborough over the next 5 years: pace of growth and expansion, affordability of town services, affordable housing. I mean, this just kind of really, it's done for me and I've seen lots of surveys, big frustration with most surveys, is you can't really use it to get focused and aligned around what you need to do next. So great work, tremendous effort by the communications committee and the town staff and everybody. I think it's quite clear that addition of a new communications dedicated resource to the director level made a huge difference. So I think the challenge for us is how do we take this now and channel this into the work that's coming forward in the next couple of weeks in terms of what our priorities might be for the year. We were very granular about that. Last year, we had 5 or 6 priorities that were pretty high that we were able to set up and knock down one after the other. These, I think, will be more challenging because they're more complicated and they're more complex and it'll be tougher to get our arms around. But this, I think, is very helpful in terms of preparing us and galvanizing us as a council to get at these. I did have a couple of questions though about administration. I know I heard some noise about confidentiality. I know this is a challenge. You want to make sure you get a good cross section, but there were a couple issues with commitments to confidentiality. But then when you get the written survey in the mail, your address is on it, the survey that you sent back. So there was that issue, and there was also a commitment in there that people would receive a letter or an email within 10 days after receiving the survey, and a lot of people didn't get that. So I know there's a balance here between trying to make sure you're hitting all the neighborhoods on the one hand, but can you speak to that a little bit from a methodology standpoint?
Yeah, sure. So as far as the address, that's something that we never share with anybody, any client or anyone else. The reason we ask for that is for a couple of reasons. One is for the statistically valid survey, it's important that it's based only on households that we randomly selected to receive the survey. That way it can't be skewed by sharing a link with your neighbor, your neighborhood, your families. So if someone were to fill out a survey online, but they weren't part of the random sample, we would check that address. And if it wasn't a household that we randomly selected, then it would not be one of these 862 surveys that were included in the statistically valid survey report.
Okay.
So that's really the biggest reason, but then also allows us to analyze the data by geographic area. So
you're trying to validate, but to some extent you have to, do what you described that you've done in order to make sure that you're getting valid responses. Thank you. But all in, piece of work. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I just want to point out, I think the feedback that I've received from councils anyways is that they've been very pleasantly surprised with the quality work that was completed here. And that's despite the fact that we rated one of the elected officials ranked almost one of the lower categories in the survey.
Well, so then our vote of confidence doesn't mean much.
That wasn't on the presentation.
So I know I diluted that point a little bit, I guess. So I think I gleaned a lot from this, and I wasn't expecting to. I was supportive of it, but I didn't think it would be as telling as it is. And usually I go around and play with the data after when it comes out because I need to look at it certain ways, and you knocked it out of the park. I didn't have the need to do that. You had everything already prepared. Any question that I had, I was able to find through the report that you provided. So thank you for that. And maybe we can play with do you have time to walk us through the maps as Councilor Johnson had requested? Is that something you have the ability to do remotely?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I will. I will. Let me just pull them up here in just a second.
I have a follow-up while you bring that up,
Sure.
Jason, if you don't mind.
Sure.
By the way, that was a compliment. This Council Clucci is an actuary, and he's a numbers cruncher. So he says you hit it out of the park. I take that as a compliment. Back to the leadership thing, which, hey, nothing embarrasses me. I saw the ratings on that, but a general question are those responses in general, meaning whoever is in the office, or is it really focused on the current content of the council, do you think?
I think it could be interpreted both ways.
So
Yeah, I mean,
it's
it's obviously a very broad question. It's not real specific. And the thing about that question, there weren't a lot of people who were dissatisfied. There are a lot more of the threes, which is the neutral rating, good solid rating. So there really weren't many ones or twos on the 5-point scale on that question. So.
Thanks. I know that was an awkward question even for you.
I feel like he just handled you with kitty gloves a little bit there. Jason, you gotta drag the average down somehow, so there's gotta be some ones and twos, right?
Right.
Jason, I think in addition to the GIS maps, if you want to run through, if you can kind of give a high level overview of the interface with the dashboard, that might be helpful as well.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. I will do that. So can you see these? Can you guys see this map?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is the one that shows.
Example, Paul was asking about public transportation, right? For different areas of town. I don't know if it's easy to cue that one up.
Yeah. There's over 100 maps, so we can go through them quickly. So this is the one that just shows the location of households that completed a survey. You can see by these black lines, these are the boundaries of the census block groups, and there are 9 census block groups. So essentially, we broke these results into 9 different areas. And what these numbers represent are the average rating for people who live in those areas. So if an area is dark blue, it doesn't literally mean every single person is satisfied. It means when you take the average score, it falls within the very satisfied ranking. So that's just kind of how these are set up. Let me just move. So this is the one about customer service. I mean, this was no surprise. Everyone throughout the town's extremely satisfied with customer service. Here are the results for overall communication. This first question was the major categories of services. So kind of the big picture, broad overview. Code enforcement. Now this is one where it's actually good to see this much blue. For code enforcement, the ratings are just never as high as some of the other areas. So this much blue is good for codes. You do see a couple of areas of the yellowish, which is more of an average rating. For traffic flow, I know this is all yellow, there's no blue, but a lot of times you see some orange or red for this question. So this actually is not too bad. Overall quality of library services, here's the results. Street, sidewalks, infrastructure, mostly satisfied, a little less satisfied in this one section. Parks and recreation, programs and facilities, kind of similar ratings all throughout the town. Public safety, dark blue, this is the highest possible rating, so very high ratings in all areas. Public transportation, there's not any one particular area that stands out. It's just kind of average ratings throughout the town. Public education, these are good. Solid waste services, a little higher ratings in this area, but otherwise pretty much the same throughout Scarborough. Stormwater management, flood control. This is public beaches and waterfront parks. This is all positive, more of a mix of the lighter blue and the darker blue. So now we're on to the next question, which was perceptions of the town, overall appearance of the town. I don't know if you guys want me to keep going with these or switch to the dashboard, but this is kind of the,
Switch, right?
okay.
The dashboard available.
Yeah, let's go through.
Okay, so this is the idea behind this. You can look at it in more detail once you get into the more specific questions on the survey. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing this.
Can't do that.
All right, so can everyone see this okay? Now we have the dashboard pulled up.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so this has all the same information that's in that big PDF report. But you can look at all the information here by just clicking on this link. And then you can also drill down into the data in ways that you can't do with the PDF report. And this is especially helpful once you have multiple years worth of data. I mean, it's really good now, but then for some of our longtime clients, they can keep several years worth of data here in this one place, just kind of easily compare the results. If we did the survey again, that some of that information would be in the PDF report, but it's just a little easier to access here. So I'll just kind of click through a few examples of what this is. So here's where trends would be. You don't have trends. These are just kind of basic results from the survey. Can you see that a little better now? I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So here you pick the category. This is major categories of services. You can pick different questions like customer service, look at the ratings. This is pretty much the same information that's in the report. One thing that's easier to access here, clear this here. If you go to results by key demographics, you can look at the demographic breakout for these questions in a lot of different ways here. So let's look at, let's look at infrastructure, the options under infrastructure. Let's look at street lighting. So here you see the satisfaction ratings broken out by race, ethnicity, male, female, by age group, by employment status, by household income, and then households with children versus households without children. So here you get a kind of a quick glance, see if there are major differences for different demographic groups. We can switch to, let's say, neighborhood streets. You can see there's not really much difference based on a lot of these categories. Let's click off of this. Let's look at COVID-19 response. See how this overall town response to COVID-19. So the younger, 86% of those under 35 were satisfied with the response to COVID-19. Interesting, the youngest and the oldest age groups were the most satisfied, but they're good all across the board. They're pretty consistent. But here you can see the differences. For income level, there were just no differences at all when it comes to COVID-19 response. So this is one of the aspects of the dashboard that is useful. That's not in the report. Just looking at these breakouts by demographic group. Another thing I think is useful is the mapping. We just took a look at the maps. Here they're broken out just a little bit differently. Let's look at condition of neighborhood streets again. Here we broke into 3 areas, which are census tracts, a little bigger groups and census block groups. So just a different way of looking at the results broken out geographically. If we were to do this survey again, then what this map would show you is not just the satisfaction for the different areas, but how the satisfaction has changed from one survey to the next, which is a really, really useful tool. And then another thing that is a little different that's not in the report. So these are these important satisfaction ratings that we're looking at. Top priority was traffic flow, followed by streets and sidewalks, third with public transportation. You can find out what the highest priorities are for more specific groups. You click on this filter page button. And I know we're going through a lot here. There's a lot of information here, so it takes a lot to really kind of get used to this. I'm just kind of hitting some highlights here.
Let's used to it. This is helpful.
Sure. So let's see what the priorities are for households with an income of household under 60,000. So here, overall, there are 862 respondents. We're going to select just these 2 groups. So those under 60,000, it's 120 respondents. Let's go back and see if their priorities are any different. So traffic flow is still number 1, but now we can see public transportation is actually 2, and streets and sidewalk infrastructure are 3. So there's a little difference between that and the overall sample. Clear the filter, go back to everyone, and then just break it out by different ways, different age groups, race, male, female. So that's one of the features that's different on the dashboard that's not in the report. So that's just kind of a quick overview of the dashboard. I don't know if you want to look at anything else, but it takes a little bit to get used to, but there really is a ton of useful information here. Some of our clients will put a link on the website so residents can kind of sort through it. Others use it more as an internal tool to kind of drill down deeper into the data, or you can do both.
Councilor Hammond.
So I had a question about this. I have to admit, I know this is just out. It just kind of came out a couple of days ago. So, I haven't had a chance to go through the details. So it's a real eye-opener to see how easy it is for you to motor through the thing. What is our plan for sharing this with the public, making it broadly available?
Liam, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So we ultimately will have a dedicated, we believe anyway, we're going to have a dedicated page on the town website to the community survey where not only the reports that Jason provided, his presentation, as well as a link to the dashboard. The only question we have right now is what that interface looks like. Some communities have a landing page kind of embedded in their website for some of these tools. Others, it's kind of a link to go outside to the ETC website. That's the only thing we're working out, but we expect most, if not all of this data will be available to the public by tomorrow in one way, shape, or form.
And the full report is in the packet for the meeting as well.
Full report and the presentation's been updated. So all of that's publicly available and has been since Friday.
Thanks, that's really helpful. And sometimes there's so much data, it's hard to kind of really know the strength and power of something like this, for folks that are experts, and statistical backgrounds, that sort of thing. Some who's GIS guy. So I'm not planning to send this to them right now, but I've seen you simulate this is really eye-opening. So thank you. And it's just another thing that restores my my confidence in the methodology that we used and how useful this will be to us as a leadership group, but also to folks in the community who are close followers and have a lot of good ideas, and I'm sure we'll have their own thoughts about some of the analysis.
Are there any other questions for Jason? Well, it's rare that we all, go ahead, Liam.
Yeah, I just want to, I know that Jason received some comments. I just want to really commend Jason. I'm sure that you have a team behind you that we didn't have the privilege of meeting, but so you're the public face, but your firm really stood out to us because of some of these tools and access, and you just did a phenomenal job being responsive to our needs and demands and met all our deadlines. So thank you very much for all your time and effort.
We were demanding.
No, I don't believe that.
Councilor Caterina.
Yeah, as the person who actually got some money put aside in a budget for this, it was money well spent as far as I'm concerned. And I apologize that I couldn't see anything you were presenting tonight. I was sort of following along on the paper. But I look forward to diving in more on this, and I'm just really excited that we actually have a so-called scientific survey with, you know, confidence percentages and whatever on it, because, you know, it's one thing to take a survey, but it's another thing altogether to get one that's valid, that's statistically valid. So thank you.
Counselor Johnson.
My only final comment, Jason, you guys don't charge enough. That's all.
Hey.
I'm Scarborough. I would like to. I've never been. I've been to most states, a lot through work, but just through vacation too, of course. But I've never been to Maine. It's one of like 10 states I've been to. So
It's the best.
absolutely, I'd like to come out there next time.
We will keep that in mind.
Keep that in mind. All right.
We'd love to meet you in person. So, well, thank you for everything. We have a regular meeting starting in 15 minutes, so we'll adjourn from the workshop and see you all in 15 minutes. And it was a pleasure, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed working on this project, and it's been great working with everyone. So yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you.